Welcome to Pastor Blast. Today is Tuesday, November 1st. It's also All Saints Day, and next Sunday is All Saints Sunday. The saints of God are not spiritually superior or biblically heroic, no matter what you hear out in the culture. In the Bible, the saints are forgiven sinners that are redeemed in Christ, and they belong to God in holy baptism. All Saints is one of my very favorite church feast days because it's about ordinary people like us who've been changed by an encounter with God. If you read, really read and look at the lives of the biblical saints, these characters, they're awfully human and they're joyfully flawed. So they're a lot like you and me. Moses had a stutter and he was insecure. Peter was a braggart and a blowhard. Mary was a pregnant teenager in a small town. And Mother Teresa, not in the Bible, suffered terrible depression. Knowing that helps me relax. I don't have to have it all together. My job is to try to be faithful. I don't have to be spiritually strong, powerful, whatever that means. I let God be strong in me. And knowing that kind of helps me relax. It teaches me not to try so hard and to trust more. The real miracle of the saints is that God takes our frail human person and personality and fills it with grace. 2 Corinthians 4:7 says, "We have this treasure in clay jars to show this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us." So when we remember the saints, there's this sense of what Frederick Buechner calls tragedy, comedy, and fairy tale. Tragedy. I think of Wilma, who was a saint I knew back when I was a pastor in Edmonds. And she and her partner John were kind of a funny couple. I'd bring communion, and John was Catholic, and so he was used to the priest, the father coming in. So he's always like, "Come on, let's get on with it." He'd bow his head while Wilma was there wanting to continue to visit. Well, when she died, only then did I discover that she had had 5 husbands that had preceded her in death, and one of her daughters had committed suicide. Tragically, I think Wilma died of a broken heart. Comedy, I think about Ron Eccles from our own congregation, the beloved husband of Eleanor. He was a quiet, thoughtful, faithful man that we knew. That's Ron, except when he was coaching his kids in soccer, baseball, whatever. He became what they called in the family Crazy Ron. He'd rant and run and rage. He was terribly overly competitive. And poor Eleanor would have to hide in the minivan until the contest was over. But his was a life well lived. We miss him. Fairy tale, another woman I visited, this one here in Gig Harbor, was a 90-plus-year-old woman named Marguerite. When they called her on the phone, she was always kind of suspicious and was a telemarketer. Says, "What do you want?" But then when I would say I'm the pastor, "Oh, pastor, come on over." She was always kind of cranky, but she had this strong faith. And she was always clear that I had to be out of there by 4 p.m. because she had a regularly scheduled happy hour with her neighbors. Well, every visit, she would kind of relive this experience in her life. She would lament about her son who died in his mid-50s of a drug overdose. And this was while living with her. And she really struggled with this. What could I have done differently, that would have helped him to live? And she was filled with regret and sorrow and guilt. We all feel so responsible for our children. But then she would light up in this fairy tale-like experience she had that was a vision of Jesus. And she spoke with such conviction that she said Jesus came to her in a dream and said, "You've done all you can do. I've got him now." And this brought a sense of relief and peace, and it totally helped her reconcile herself with this episode in her life. I always say that's something every parent ought to have, right? That kind of experience as we worry if we did it right or could have done things differently. But Marguerite experienced a sense of fairy tale in that. You see, these are all the saints. They're like us. They've got tragedy, comedy, and fairy tale in their life. And the difference is God's grace. Paul says, "I am who I am by the grace of God," and that grace is not without impact upon me. Blessed All Saints Day. Amen.